Why did you decide that ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, was a good fit for you professionally? What about it appealed to you?
I learned about ETA about halfway through business school, so I was pretty excited about the concept of a medium-sized business and really wanted to focus on developing myself as a leader and really getting to see a business through a period of growth. So there's a couple of different ways that you could do that, but ETA was one of them that I looked at, and it really demonstrated the ability to have a lot of control over your future, getting to pick out the investors that you work with, getting to later on assemble your board, finding the business, and really gave you a lot of opportunity to build the life that you want to have, that going and getting a job working at a similar sized business didn't seem to offer.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, and Plexus Capital. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy. Hello and welcome to Search Party. I'm David Snow, your host, and today we're joined by Audrey Kohout of Luggage Forward, Katie Walker of Plexus Capital, and Tatiana Gaspar of Next Coast Legacy. Everybody, welcome to Search Party today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So today we're talking all about success in the entrepreneurship through acquisition strategy. The three of you are all involved in the ETA world. And the three of you also have something in common, which is that you are all members of an organization called the Women's Search Network. And we're going to learn about the mission and basically why it exists. Why don't we start out, though, with a few self-introductions, and perhaps we could start with Tatiana Gaspar of Next Coast Legacy. Tatiana, how do you fit into the entrepreneurship through acquisition ecosystem?
First, thanks for having me, David. I'm excited to chat with you and Katie and Audrey today. So I am a director at Next Coast Legacy. We are investors in the space. So my day-to-day revolves around working with entrepreneurs that are looking for companies to acquire and then helping them throughout that process, and having conversations with sellers, submitting a proposal to those sellers, and then diligencing the company, ensuring it's a great investment so that we can all ultimately acquire it together and run it. I'm also a board member at the Women's Search Network, and we can talk about the WSN a little bit later.
Katie Walker from Plexus Capital. Do you mind introducing yourself and Plexus Capital?
Thanks for having us, David. Excited to be here, and also excited that we can outnumber you in gender. So that's fun. I'm Katie Walker. I'm a principal at Plexus Capital. We are a small business investment firm. We're located in North Carolina, but invest all over the country. And a lot of what we do is investing in search deals. Our bread and butter is really small business, so less than 10 million of EBITDA, and the sorts of attributes that overlay nicely with what searchers tend to be interested in. And the way that we fit in is really not at the initial search phase, but post LOI, when there's a deal to be done. We serve as a lender and then also a minority equity investor alongside the rest of the search investors. So we think it's a really exciting place to play. Obviously, it's growing tremendously, and we're excited to be a part of it. So that's me.
Excellent. Audrey, perhaps you could give us a bit more of your backstory, because your story is the story of ETA searchers. You started out looking for a company and ultimately with a partner. You acquired a company with partners, Luggage Forward, which, by the way, I definitely will be using. And you are now co-CEO of Luggage Forward. So maybe you could just walk us through sort of that journey to where you are today.
My journey is pretty similar to a lot of people that have pursued ETA. I went to business school, raised a search fund in 2020, spent 2 years looking for a company to buy. Ultimately, me and my co-CEO purchased Luggage Forward, and we've been running the business for about 2 years. Before all of that, I did corporate strategy at Target, and my co-CEO came from investment banking and private equity.
Why did you decide that ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, was a good fit for you professionally? What about it appealed to you?
Yeah, so I learned about ETA about halfway through business school. And my experience had been at Target at this really large company. And then at Target, I did a lot of work with smaller startups and seeing people in really that seed to Series A spot in company growth. And I knew that neither of those were for me. So I was pretty excited about the concept of a medium-sized business and really wanted to focus on developing myself as a leader and really getting to see a business through a period of growth. So there's a couple of different ways that you could do that. But ETA was one of them that I looked at, and it really demonstrated the ability to have a lot of control over your future, getting to pick out the investors that you work with, getting to later on assemble your board, finding the business, and really gave you a lot of opportunity to build the life that you want to have, that going and getting a job working at a similar sized business didn't seem to offer.
Audrey, I'm so glad to be chatting with you again. I would love to hear just more about how you partnered up with your co-CEO, like what that thought process looked like, and also what it's like to be two female CEOs. Are there any other search deals out there that are two female CEOs? Lots of questions in one.
Yeah, so we know of at least one other deal because of those two co-CEOs, one of them is on our board. So that's Jessica Markowitz from Paragon Legal, which it's been really wonderful getting to have her representation and her story be part of our board conversations. But we think that we might be the second set after them. So Jess and I, on paper, I think are super, super complementary, from me bringing more of that strategy, marketing, retail mindset background to our business, and her bringing some of that financial understanding, some of that more small, medium business understanding from the types of businesses she was investing in while she was in private equity. But we're also really similar aligned on values. And I think that that's where, if you don't have both of those, you're not going to have a successful partnership in both the ways that we want to see and run the business, but also how we're building our lives at the same time that we're building a company, and the conversations that we need to have in order for both of us to be having the lives that we want to have as CEOs, but also the times of the day that we're not actively CEOs. So we're pretty happy. I think it'd be really hard to run this business without her. And it's been really fun getting to grow our partnership over the last couple of years.
Nexus Legacy is actually on Audrey's cap table. So when I joined the firm, which was 3.5, I guess almost 4 years ago now, Audrey was the first searcher I think that I spoke with. And so it's been very incredible to see how far you and Jessica have come. What I wanted to ask you is, as you were thinking about search and you were considering whether this was the right path for you, what are some things that were top of mind as you were considering it? Were there any concerns? Were there any concerns that you felt might have been, more specific to you being a woman in this space? Or do you think that you were kind of grappling with the same questions that, men also have?
I fundraised my search fund in 2020. So I didn't get the opportunity to meet with a lot of my investors in person and to spend significant amount of time with them. So when I was thinking about what sort of search fund I would raise, one of the reasons why I wanted to go with a traditional search as opposed to an accelerator model was almost just some of the distribution of risk of the relationship that you form over a couple of hours, taking money from someone and then having that be a really, really big decision for years to come. Being able to really spend the time and get to know your investors while you're fundraising was something that I think as a woman was probably a little bit more top of mind or important for me than it would be for a man, just wanting to really make sure that I was working with people that were going to be in it for the long haul with me, respect me, have the hard conversations with me, and be really aligned on what we're doing. Because investing in the search is kind of the easy part. Doing the deal is the hard part. I sort of saw there was this desire to have more women in search, but was there a desire to have more women be CEOs? And was there a desire to have more women be getting deals done? And understanding that people that were, maybe not going to support maybe the industry wasn't the right industry for them. And that's totally fine. But are we going to have that mutual respect along the way? That was really important for me.
Audrey, can you take us back to your acquisition of Luggage Forward? As you said, getting the deal done is a very hard thing to do. In fact, many searchers don't even find an acquisition during their search period. So how were you and your partner able to clinch the deal?
Yeah, first off, I do feel like I got really lucky with Luggage Forward. So I'll start with that. But, it's also one of those cliches, like it takes a lot of hard work to get lucky. Like we'd been searching for 2 years, collectively like 4 years prior to acquiring Luggage Forward. So it took a little while. I definitely thought when I started my search, odds are I'm buying a business from a woman. Odds are I'm buying a business from a woman in the region of the country that I'm in. But it turned out, bought a business from 2 guys based in Boston. I think some of the story within search is, you find people that you have all this in common with, and they see the younger version of you. And it's easy to assume that that's that gender is going to play a role in it. And I think with a lot of sellers, for sure it does, but also a man who doesn't want to sell to a woman wasn't going to waste my time. The conversations I did have were often very real that I was having with sellers. And when I first met one of the sellers from Luggage Forward, we'd had just a pretty quick chat, and he called me back immediately and he's like, "You went to McAllister College?" I was like, "I did." He's like, "My sister went there." I was like, "Great." And he'd also gone to a liberal arts school, and we quickly found these things in common. 2 years out from having done the deal, it's really clear to me looking backwards, a lot of just similar values in like who we were as people that transcended gender and transcended a lot of other things in order for me and Jess to be a really good fit for Luggage Forward. Because I don't necessarily know if we would have been a great fit for every business, but we were a really good fit for where we ended up.
Will you tell us a little bit about just like what those values are, or like how you two identify as a leadership team, outside of the, nuts and bolts and numbers and strategy?
I think a lot of it is about supporting the people. Search has, I'd say, like Jess and I share a lot of values with a lot of people who have chosen to be ETA CEOs. You're in it because you were excited, and you do have to work hard. It is a grind. But you were building, and there's something about that that's really fun, but it's also tiring. And so how are you supporting one another to make sure that you're getting your time off, you're getting your rest? We're also in it for the long haul. This isn't a quick flip kind of thing, and we want the same thing for the people that work for us. So a lot of our year this year has been building a senior leadership team and finding people who we want to be able to set up with that same mindset of we're growing, we're building. There's a lot of choice. There's a lot of ownership. The business is 20 years old, and doing new things and integrating with a business that is 20 years old is hard. If it was a startup, you could have done A, B, and C yesterday, but we have to figure out how to do A, B, and C when X, Y, and Z already exist.
Yeah, that's such an interesting comparison, like thinking about a more established business. There's lots of benefits to that, but also slower change, especially when taking on a new CEO or two. What is like Audrey and Jess's life look like outside of being a CEO? Of course, everybody grinds and works hard, and then like private equity generally or finance generally, everyone loves to talk about how busy they are. And I'm so sick of it. So tell me, what does Audrey look like outside of being a CEO?
Yeah, well, I live in Colorado where no one wants to talk about how busy they are.
Love it.
And and Jess is in Chicago. So we're a virtual business. So that definitely adds a level to what our lives look like. Jess and I are both obsessed with our pets. She was a D1 athlete. I played intramurals in college and still do some of that here. We put these things on our work calendars and are able to know and see that there is time that is respected in order to get out and move our bodies and be able to do the things that keep us happy and empowered in order to come in and be the best we can be at work.
That's awesome. And like, what a great leadership example for your team, in a way to like set them up for success and just help everyone maximize potential. That's awesome.
And I will add, Katie, also a great role model for prospective searchers out there that are thinking about following this path. And, there aren't that many women doing that right now. I think to Audrey's point, Audrey and Jessica are probably the second duo that's actually gone through this. I think the number right now is 17% of search funds raised in 2023 were by women. That makes the, life to date average much lower than that. And so one thing that we hear a lot in the Women's Search Network from prospective searchers as a concern is, can I do this? Has this been done? And it's examples like, Audrey and Jessica, I think, over the years that are going to be helpful in encouraging more and more women to actually pursue this as a career.
Why historically have women been, one could say, vastly underrepresented in the entrepreneurship through acquisition community? Of course, this is not an imbalance that is unique to ETA. If one looks across finance, why do you think there are not as many women who decide to look for a business, find a business, become the CEO?
I'm going to jump in here really quickly just to say I think it's actually very interesting. It's a very interesting question because I believe the dynamic in ETA might be slightly different than the dynamic in other places in finance. And I'd love to hear kind of Audrey and Kim's thoughts from slightly different seats. But from my seat as an investor, we want more women, right? Like the conversations we're having with students at the different MBA programs, we're talking to everyone. We want to invest more in women. But when it comes to, the top of the funnel, if you will, of the people that are interested, or not even just interested, but truly committed to search, there are just less women that are making that decision to actually do it. And so the question becomes, why are women hesitating? Is it because they're not interested, or is there something else in the thought process that is making it so that they either don't feel like it's for them, or they don't feel like they're capable, right? Or something, or the time in your life where you're thinking about family planning and you're thinking about settling, does that weigh more on women? And so what we hear from prospective searchers, and we can get into the conversation of, how many of these things are actually misconceptions. It is that hesitation of, am I going to be able to build relationships with, investors that are mostly men? Am I going to be able to relate to these sellers that are probably also mostly men? And what does it look like for my life? Some women have partners and are trying to have children. Some women might be single and are trying to figure out, they do want a family and they're trying to figure that out. And the idea with search is that you're going to buy a company wherever a company is, right? And that you're going to move there. Audrey's case is great because it's remote, but that's not always the case. And so these are all considerations and things that women think through. And I will end by saying, I also think, my opinion, the women that I've spoken to are a lot more self-critical than the men that I've spoken to. I think there's a confidence element too of overthinking a little bit. Of being, can I actually do this? I've never been a CEO before. It's like, well, but you have most of these men. So yeah, you're just as qualified. And so there's a little bit of that at play too from the conversations that I've had.
Let's take a quick break to learn about a partner you should consider as you build a business in the lower middle market, Avid Bank. Based in Silicon Valley, Avid Bank has been dedicated to the search fund community for more than 10 years. The professionals at Avid Bank are seasoned veterans of the entrepreneurship-through-acquisition strategy. They have a long history of working with growing companies across the life cycle of an investment. With more than $2.25 billion in assets, Avid Bank is known for its highly responsive, consultative practice, as well as its deep knowledge of M&A financing in the lower middle market. The friendly professionals at Avid Bank have a straightforward motto: we do what we say. And they really do. Look for episodes of Search Party that feature market commentary from Avid Bank experts. You'll learn a lot about the dynamics of lending and finance in the lower middle market. All right, now back to the episode.
Yeah, and I'll jump in maybe just to give an example or a comment that I make to my team a lot, which is, so we have an investment team of give or take 20 people. I'm the only woman on the investment team. We do have another woman starting with us in January. I'm really excited, but it's hard. The question I'll often ask my male counterparts is, can you imagine going on a business trip? Let's say it's 1 or 2 nights, and it's you and this other group of people, colleagues that you're working with, and you're going to be together 12 hours of the day, except for the 12 that you're in your hotel room. You're eating breakfast together. You're going to see them in the gym. You do meetings, you do meals. Maybe you break for a work call, but you're together all the time. And imagine that you were the only man and it was 6 other women. Like, how do you think that would go? And the response is overwhelmingly like, oh my gosh, that would be so awkward. It can be intimidating or just feel different to put yourself in settings where you know you're going to be only one of that gender. Going out to dinner with 6 women, for me, is a lot more enjoyable than going out to dinner with 6 men. It's a lot more natural. So I just think that's a reality. It's not a problem necessarily, but I think it's just a reality to be, acknowledged.
Over the last couple of years, there are women who have been joining these investment firms, who have been building out the WSN, who have been getting promoted as a woman running a business. We keep an eye on that. We love to see that, and know that it's going to be a little bit different for women who are thinking about searching now than it was for us even 5 years ago. Yeah, women might be underrepresented in search. Men also might be kind of overrepresented. You meet people who thought coming from private equity, they knew how to run a small business. I think a lot of my female CEO peers and friends are just incredibly realistic about the experience, both as we were searching and as we've been CEOs.
I'm having a conversation with this one woman right now who is awesome. And she is overthinking it. And she's thinking to herself, can I do it? I've never done this before. Can I jump from my current experience into an operator role? Part of what I would like to do at the WSN is encouraging women to take that leap and to believe in themselves, right? To find that middle ground of understanding the reality of it, but also having the self-confidence to say, no, I'm going to take this risk because there's a real chance that I could do this.
Yeah, I love that point. And I think if I could just also bring a different perspective from, the other side of things, one of the reasons that I personally am so engaged in search and have taken on this leadership opportunity within Plexus is actually because I have found it to be a very welcoming, open space. And a number of years ago, I had the option of going to a search conference or another conference. And it was such a clear answer for me, just based on the openness and the representation and frankly, the number of women that would be there, that search was the right place for me to go. The alternative was 950 men and 50 women. And, all the men were over 6 feet tall and had on their blue blazers. And I'm 5'2" and not putting on heels. So it's a really good ecosystem in which to be doing that. I find it very welcoming and just engaging.
So Tatiana, you shared a Stanford Business School study with me that showed that in representation in ETA specifically went from sort of 11% women to 17% women over the last couple of years. So there is momentum taking place. But let's talk about the mission of the Women's Search Network. What is it? What is it trying to accomplish? Why does it exist?
So the WSN is a platform that started around 5 years ago that is meant to encourage and support women in the space. So the idea of encouraging those that aren't sure, but that would potentially like to do so by presenting role models and facilitating connections, offering resources, and all of that good stuff. And the idea is to support women throughout all steps of the journey, right? So from that moment of, is this something that might make sense for me, through actively doing it, and then all the way through being a CEO. We have a member directory that searchers and CEOs can reach out to each other through. We have a CEO offsite that we host that was started last year that we're doing this year again in December, a mentorship program for active searchers. It has been very amazing to see how the WSN has grown for the past couple of years. We have recently become a nonprofit. We redid our website and we have sponsors, Plexus included, and which we're very excited about. So now we have a budget to be able to actually move a lot of these initiatives forward, some of which were previously on paper, but now we can afford to do so.
What I think is really distinct about the WSN is the action. Everybody talks about the gender issue in different shapes and forms. People take varying levels of initiative, but what I've seen from the WSN is incredible. It's there has been so much action. I mean, for anybody listening, male or female, we should check out the website. It is the most interactive, engaging, resourceful place for women to go. And then you talk about the webinars, CEO conference, in-person events. I'm confident it is really making a difference. So it's exciting to be a part of it.
So the WSN did run a study. 78% of the active searchers interviewed said that being a woman was either neutral or kind of to their advantage in some way. I think the number for sellers was closer to 58. And so we're seeing women realizing that their fears might actually not come to fruition, which I think is very positive and encouraging. More than half said that they were very happy that they chose search, and that while the uncertainty is daunting, and that is something that they lived with throughout the process, that the flexibility and the ownership and the learning and the growth opportunity, all of that was sufficient to kind of counter that fear and that uncertainty. Maybe Audrey has a little bit more here from her experience or other searchers that she's spoken with, but that was kind of the outcome of the survey, and we were very happy to see it.
Katie Walker, you touched on something earlier, or Audrey also touched on it, which is that in some cases, including in the search phase itself, one could argue that in certain cases, women have an advantage. And I'm wondering if you could sort of explain that dynamic.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear Audrey's perspective too, because unfortunately I've never searched, but we do see a lot of small businesses talk with a lot of sellers and a lot of searchers, and also other groups like independent sponsors, private equity firms. And look, it can be very hard. I already gave the example of having to spend 48 hours with all men. But on the flip side, there are certainly advantages. And sometimes I feel like it's like our best kept secret. You know, we don't need to shine too much light on it, but I can tell you what, nobody is forgetting my name when there's a group of 6 and it's, Mike, Brad, Barrett, Kevin, and Katie. They're remembering Katie. Or like when we get on a Zoom and you see my face and then 6 other men, you immediately know who Katie is, or Audrey, or Tatiana. So there's some just like really basic advantages like that I think are meaningful. And then there's also like connective advantages as there are, with any attribute that you might have or interest. But I've found working with men who only have daughters is a really great place to play, especially when their daughters are ambitious and, they want more for their daughters. There's also just people that don't want to be on the beaten path. Like they want to do something different. And talking to a woman is that, really. But Audrey, what was your experience like?
Yeah, I'd say overall, I wouldn't say it was helpful searching as a woman, but it also, the things that mattered were made more clear that they were going to come together for me because I was a woman. Like the small and mighty few of women who are investors, who are searchers, who are CEOs, like the community is really fantastic. In the Luggage Forward deal, I was just like trying to get the sellers to maybe say something nice about me. And why did you choose us? You're 2 guys in Boston. There's no way you haven't heard from searchers before. And what I heard back from them was, we're not sure if it's because you're a woman, but it seemed like you were willing to ask questions and learn the business and not come in and bulldoze your way through as if you knew everything. We run a pretty complicated global logistics business. We spent a decent amount of time with the sellers learning how to run the company and some of the intricacies of what we do. And whether it's because I'm a woman or not, I know that they viewed some of the humility, curiosity that Jess and I brought to the table a little bit more strongly because we're women. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, we got the deal done.
Katie Walker, you had an idea for asking a question. Basically, can you come up with a short anecdote that's either funny, touching, cringeworthy, that illustrates what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated industry?
Yeah, my funny story blooper reel idea. I mean, there's a lot of stories. I've got a lot of stories. I'm sure everybody does. So the short story is I was traveling for a management meeting. It was me and 2 partners. And this was a number of years ago. I think I was a VP on the deal team. And we got to lunch, and it was with an independent sponsor. And the independent sponsor, the 2 partners knew, but I had not worked with before. So everybody kind of said their hellos and pleasantries. And then I introduced myself to the guys. And the first question they asked me was, well, what do you do at Plexus? And I'm like, Mike doesn't bring his secretary along for management meetings halfway across the country, so not that. What do you think I do at Plexus? I'm on the investment team. I'm here for a management meeting to do due diligence. Next. So anyways, that one just always sticks with me.
I have very similar stories. That's actually really funny. Yeah, that happens to me not infrequently. That I am either, I wear a lot of hats at Nexus, so there's some benefit of the doubt, always benefit of the doubt, but it has happened more than once that I am like looped in exclusively to schedule something for Anthony, or I'm working on like the NDA process because I'm doing that part. And I am dropped from an email when the person sends investment materials has also happened. So I'm familiar with those also.
Yeah, Tatiana's like totally underselling herself when she says she wears many hats. What she means is like she runs the show. So it's very audacious to take her off an email or ask her to schedule something.
I do a lot of our partnership work with travel companies. And I'd say like a lot of the people at work in travel are fantastic. And so I now live in a little bit of a bubble, which has been really nice. To answer Katie's original question, during the deal, it became kind of a joke as to how many emails I got back that were, "Hi, Andrew." It's just like, no, that's not even really like close to my name. I don't deal with that anymore.
Audrey, you made a comment earlier about how you felt you got lucky with Luggage Forward, and then you made a small comment about creating your own luck, which should get a lot of airtime. But also, like, you created that bubble. You've built an opportunity for yourself. You did this deal. You're building out your team. You've developed these relationships, and now you're in this like awesome environment that you fostered where gender is far less of a consideration. So heck yeah, love it.
Katie, question for you. When you're working with searchers, so you probably work with a lot more male searchers than women searchers, just based on the population, of course. Do you see any difference in terms of, introducing a deal or having the conversation around debt in terms of how searchers are approaching those conversations?
The bigger difference I see is based on searchers' professional backgrounds. So someone that comes from the deal world and is comfortable with, IOIs and LOIs and leverage reads is maybe a little bit less apt to talk to me or start to build a relationship pre-LOI, which is totally fine. And then the folks that come from more operating backgrounds who, never done a deal in their life, which is also totally fine, tend to come earlier.
I always encourage people to talk to you as quickly as possible, both because you're awesome and also because, building relationships with the folks that might come onto your deal earlier on is not a bad idea.
But I always tell people, like, you can ask me the stupid questions. Like, I'm not your investor. Like, you don't have to impress me. Like, you want to ask me what leverage is? Let's talk about it.
That's why I send people your way, Katie. One thing I wanted to add that we have not touched on at all, which I think is important, it's family planning. I would love Audrey's and Katie's thoughts here. And just from the WSN standpoint, we're coming at this as we should all be making room for the conversation. We need to be open to this conversation in the first place and to have this conversation at the board level, have this conversation at the investor cap table level, because I don't know that it's happening at the rate that it probably should be happening.
We're all kind of winging it. And we're all figuring out our own journeys with our families and our businesses and our boards. I do think that there would be an appreciation from those of us that are searching, are running businesses, to hear this is a great career path to build a family. When you get a lot of the things right in search and you buy a great business, you create a lot of flexibility. You have the opportunity to hire excellent people around you. I think it would be appreciated to hear more from the investor group of what this can look like, both for women and for men.
A lot of the women that are searching, have searched CEOs, have had children throughout the process. And I will say that I think as a percent of total, men have had a lot more children than women. But women have, and they've done it really well in terms of managing it. And of course, it's hard. I'm not underplaying that by any stretch, but women have done it. Making this conversation a little bit more front and center is also talking about it is being done and it has been done. There is a way in which you can pursue this career and have children, if that's what you so desire.
I do work at a male-dominated firm, and I am a wife, and a mother, and it is so hard. It is so hard. And I would just go back to the earlier point around a lot of the like values and positive attributes of the search community, and just like the general openness and excitement to engage, and not to put the onus on all the women, but I think just having the confidence that people want to have the conversation is really important. And hopefully in this interim period, we can get to a point where it is initiated from the board and from the investors. But at least for now, like, it makes me feel excited just to know how open and engaged and willing everyone is while they're still figuring out how to initiate.
Well, thank you all so much for being on Search Party, sharing your expertise and your experience in the ETA industry. It's important that people hear these stories, and of course, it gives people confidence that if something's been done before, that they can do it too. So huge thanks to Audrey, to Katie, to Tatiana, and I hope I can have all three of you back on Search Party in the future to give us an update.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, and Plexus Capital. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy.